Mr. Leong Man Wai. Question 3 to 5. Sir Pritam Singh, would you like to raise?
Mr. Speaker, may I take questions 3 and 4 addressed to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, and question 5 addressed to the Minister for National Development, together as they relate to the same subject matter, namely the sale of state land, and how the proceeds are treated, and the reserves?
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, sir, before these questions can be addressed, it is necessary to understand the relationship between state land, land sales proceeds, and our reserves. It has been explained before, but it bears repeating and some elaboration. Under our land laws, which trace back to English land laws, all title to land in Singapore is derived from the state. It is from this ultimate title to the state, title to land that is held by the state, that interest in land, such as leases, can be carved out and granted by the state to other persons. The leases confer ownership and possession of those lands to such other persons, but only for the duration of the lease. The state retains the interest in the balance of the lands not leased, and for lands which have been leased, in the rest of the period not granted. In a case where the state has granted a portion of its interests, for example, under a 99-year lease to other persons, the state holds the remainder of those interests, meaning after the 99th year for perpetuity, which we refer to as the reversionary interests. Where the state has not granted any interest in a piece of land, or no one is named as the person owning the lease, the land remains state land. Under the Constitution, all state land forms part of our reserves. Land is a physical asset. And Mr. Speaker, just to help people understand, may I have permission to show some slides?
Please do.
When we sell state land, we convert the physical asset into a financial asset. So, for example, if we sell a parcel of state land at its fair market value of, say, $1 million, we no longer have the land for the term of the lease sold, but we have $1 million. After this transaction, there is no net increase in the reserves. We have merely changed the physical land in our reserves into an equivalent amount of financial reserves. There is no new value created and hence no addition to the reserves. Now, let's see what happens to the cash and to the land. The $1 million cash now forms part of our financial reserves, which the government invests, for example, through GIC, to grow for the benefit of Singaporeans. We use up to 50% of the long-term expected real returns on the investment every year in our annual budget. This amount is known as the Net Investment Return Contribution, or NIRC. The rest of the actual returns, that is, 100% of the actual returns minus 50% of the long-term expected real returns, is reinvested. This rule strikes a balance between the needs of current and future generations of Singaporeans. It preserves the real value of our reserves and assures us of a rainy day fund in the event of future crises. Now, Let's turn to the land that has been sold. As the state holds ultimate title to the land automatically reverts to the state once the 99 years is up. It then becomes state land again and will be protected as past reserves once again. When that happens, there is no net increase in our reserves either. This is because the reversionary interest in that parcel of land had all along formed part of our reserves. In other words, the financial proceeds that we had earlier received was to make up for the state's loss of use of the land for 99 years, and not for the state giving the land away forever. If the government then carves out another lease of the same land and sells this land on a fresh lease, the same process as before will apply. Again, it will be a conversion of a physical asset to a financial asset to make up for the state's loss of use of the land for the period of that carving out. Thus, the answer to Mr. Leong's first question is A, there is no net increase in the reserves when state land is first sold and the sale proceeds are transferred to the financial assets. It's just a conversion of one asset form to another. B, there is no net increase in the reserves when the land returns to the state after the lease expires, as the value of the lease did not include the value of the reversionary interest. C, there is again no increase in the reserves when the land which was returned to the government is sold again, as before, that is merely a conversion of one form of asset to another. D, but there is an increase in reserves when the government invests and grows the financial assets. This is the outcome of careful and prudent management of our reserves by this government and should not be taken for granted. I move on to Mr. Leong's second query. There is no triple payment by Singaporeans for the land used to develop HDB flats. From time to time, the government may need to compulsorily acquire land for public housing. In that event, the following steps occur. First, the government will acquire the land and compensate the landowner for its value. Since 2007, the compensation is based on fair market value. This compensation may be funded from past reserves or government revenues. Land acquisition through SERS, for instance, is funded by past reserves. Second, HDB will purchase the land from the government. HDB pays fair market value for it, just like any other buyer of state land. Now, why do we do this? Why don't we simply transfer the land to HDB at zero cost, since it is a transaction between government and a government agency? The reason is because the transfer to HDB for developing public housing results in the land being taken out of the past reserves. If fair market value is not paid in exchange for the land, the past reserves will be depleted. There would be no corresponding financial asset to replace the physical asset, and no land sales proceeds to invest and generate returns for use in the form of the NIRC. Requiring HDB to pay fair market value for the land cost thus preserves the value of our past reserves for the benefit of all Singaporeans, both present and future. Then the third transaction is when HDB sells flats to Singaporeans. HDB does so at a discount from fair market value to keep flat prices affordable. The difference between the fair market value and HDB's posted price is the market subsidy. In addition, the government provides generous grants to eligible applicants to purchase flats below HDB's posted price. Because of these grants and subsidies, HDB's effective selling price is typically much lower than the total cost of development, which results in a revenue shortfall. This shortfall is covered by a government grant to HDB, which is funded by NIRC and taxes, which are paid not only by Singaporeans, but also by PRs, foreigners working and living in Singapore, tourists and companies, and other tax-paying entities. The answer to Mr. Leong's second question, therefore, is that A, the government does not profit from the sale of state land developed into public housing. B, there is no triple payment by Singaporeans for state land used for public housing. C, Singaporeans buy BTO flats at a discount from their fair market value, and in addition, eligible first-timer flat buyers can enjoy the enhanced CPF housing grant, or EHG, of up to $80,000. D, this can be seen from the fact that a private property of similar size and in a similar location would cost significantly more, and also the fact that after the minimum occupation period, HDB flat owners are typically able to sell their flats at comparable or higher prices than they paid when they purchased their flats from HDB. Mr. Pritam Singh asked whether, in view of the POFMA correction direction issued on 14th October 2022, HDB will provide a breakdown of the total development cost of BTO flats and the value of the subsidies applied to them. The POFMA clarification states that HDB does not price new flats to recover the cost of land and construction. Instead, it prices flats significantly below market value using generous subsidies to ensure they are affordable to Singaporeans. This is indisputable for the reasons I have just explained. It is also confirmed by the fact that the vast majority of first-timer families are able to buy new BTO flats in non-mature estates and service their monthly mortgage installments using their CPF with zero or minimal cash outlay. Finally, it is evident from HDB's audited financial statements, which are publicly available. The financial statements contain information on the costs incurred in its home ownership program. They show that the total amount that HDB collects from the sale of flats is less than the cost of its building program and the housing grants it disburses each year. As a result, HDB incurs a net deficit in the development and sale of new flats. For the financial year FY 2021-2022, HDB recorded a deficit of 3.85 billion in its home ownership program. The average deficit incurred by HDB in the last 3 years, FY 2019-2020 to FY 2021-2022, was about 2.68 billion a year.
Leader of Opposition, Mr. Pritam Singh.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe Minister has answered the question number 5, whether HDB will be providing a clear breakdown of the costs.
Can I just check before I respond to that? Because the question that was asked by the Leader of the Opposition in his PQ was, in view of the POFMA correction directions issued, whether HDB will provide a breakdown. So I'm just seeking to understand so that I can give an appropriate answer. What is the correlation between the POFMA correction direction and your request?
And the correlation is the government's point that flats are generously subsidized before they are sold. That's the correlation. So a subsidy is applied by HDB, and that's why flats can be sold at an affordable price. So that's the correlation.
I'm not sure I understand the correlation. I think everybody knows that HDB applies subsidies, significant subsidies. So I think there are two things. If Mr. Singh was just asking, can you provide the breakdown? That I understand. But he's saying, in view of the POFMA correction, whether HDB will provide the breakdown. So I will answer Mr. Singh's question on whether we provide the breakdown. I'm just trying to understand how it's correlated, because the fact that we provided subsidies has always been known long before the POFMA correction notice. So I just want to know the connection.
The connection would be that the identity of the individual who was issued the POFMA correction direction. This is I can't name him by virtue of standing orders, but he was the chief economist of the Government of Singapore Investment Corporation. So if the minister says that this has been known for a long time, one would expect someone of that stature to also not fall foul of POFMA and be POFMAN. But I think Minister has said that she will answer the question, so I hope Minister can answer the question whether HDB will provide a breakdown of the subsidies.
Again, and I will answer the question, but I want to deal with the first part. If Mr. Singh says that, how come somebody who's an ex-economist of, did you name the organization? Okay, of GIC can be POFMA'd. I don't think there is any rule in the law books which says that economists and ex-economists of GIC cannot be POFMA'd. What the law says is that if you say something which is factually incorrect, then you're required to post a direction pointing out to it. And you can challenge that if you wish to. Point number one, which he hasn't. Point number two is Mr. Singh still hasn't really answered what the correlation is. But why don't I just cut to the chase? Because unless Mr. Singh wishes to provide further clarification. The chase is this. The POFMA Post says that alleged that there was a disingenuous and misleading analysis of the 270 million loss made by HDB. That's what the POFMA Post said. Said that there was an accounting sleight of hand being an omission, that the government acquired most of its land at minimal or much lower costs by compulsory acquisition, and that the true cost price should be the original book value. Those were the key things. And in response, the POFMA clarification pointed out that actually there is a real loss. And the fact that when we build HDB flats under the housing program, the fact that the government incurs losses, that's known and was always known, even before Mr. Yeo posted it. But coming back to the question that the leader of the opposition has asked, the reason why I say there's no correlation is this. It's because in the POFMA clarification, what Minister Desmond Lee gave was the net loss. Now let me just explain. Total development costs is land costs plus construction costs, and that gives you total development costs. Then you have the selling price. The selling price is the market value of the land after it's been built. We apply a market subsidy, we derive the selling price, we put in various grants, and we arrive at the effective selling price. And the effective selling price, what we sell to Singaporeans, less the total development costs, will give you, in virtually all cases, a net loss. Obviously, because we are subsidizing, we are selling below market value. If we were to sell at market value, all HDB purchasers of BTOs would be paying a lot more. And that's just evident, as I explained in my earlier answer, by the fact that you look at the resale prices, plus the fact that after the MOP expires when they sell. So I just wanted to establish that the POFMA clarification talked about the net loss for a particular project. That's a subset of the information which is already in the HDB financials, which is the total aggregate net loss. And it's a separate issue from total development costs, which is a separate thing. So when Mr. Singh asked, in view of the POFMA correction direction, is HDB going to give the breakdown of total development costs? That's not, there isn't a real correlation there. They're two separate things. Should we give the total development costs? The answer is that we don't think that anything would be achieved by doing so. And the reason is this. What is the real important thing to Singaporeans? The real important thing is, are you able to afford the flat? And what the government does is it takes the market value, which people will know when you know any particular area, you ask any valuer, they'll be able to give you a general value. And you look at the selling price and the grants, and every Singaporean who buys a BTO knows that actually the price that they are paying is less than what you would have to pay if you were paying at pure market price. That's why BTOs are so popular. Otherwise, you would buy resale. And then what happens to the government is at the end of the day, in almost all cases, we have a net loss. So different places will have different pricing and different subsidies. So Mr. Singh's question was, would we give a breakdown for every single, he said, provide breakdown of cost of all new flats henceforth. It's not meaningful because you will be just comparing this one with this one, and prices in one area may not be the same as the other. So that is the answer. My straightforward answer is it won't be helpful or meaningful to do so.
Mrs. Singh?
Thank you for answering the question. So let me suggest why it perhaps could be meaningful. And I'll do this by way of two supplementary questions. This is specific to PQ number 5. I'll come back to PQ 3 and 4 in a while. So since the introduction of the prime location housing of PLH flats last year, it suggests to me at least, or provides an example why a detailed publication of HDB subsidies are actually warranted. A HDB PLH flat buyer, upon selling his PLH flat after 10-year MOP, will have to return the quantum of additional subsidies provided as a percentage of the original assessed market value of the flat. And the subsidy recovery will apply to the resale price that is a reflection of the prevailing market value, regardless if the flat is sold at a gain or a loss. Another reason I would suggest to the Minister to publish the dollar value of the subsidy is to scrutinize and track the amount of subsidies being diverted for home ownership purposes. This is particularly in view of the Ministry of National Development's 2011 decision to de-link BTO prices from the rising resale market then. The median price of a four-room and larger HDB resale flats has increased 26% between 2017 and 2022. With resale prices reaching record highs today and therefore pushing up the market price of land, increasing the size of the subsidies under the current HDB policy would appear to be the main way through which BTO prices will be kept affordable. In view of these new reasons, what is preventing HDB from publishing the dollar value of HDB subsidies for new BTO flats? Second SQ, HDB's index for affordability, the Minister spoke about it in her last reply, only covers non-mature estates. HDB states that the price-to-income ratio for BTO flats offered in non-mature estates is around 5 or less, which means the purchase price is around 5 times one's annual income, or around 25% of one's salary is set aside for mortgage servicing. Why does the Ministry not disclose the corresponding affordability figures for mature HDB BTO estates, HDB estates which are mature estates? Thank you.
Respect to prime location housing, it actually doesn't really change my answer. Because at the end of the day, the question is what is affordable to the person who's buying? And we have made no secret of the fact that for prime location housing, you will have to have a greater subsidy. So that's the key thing. So it comes back to the same question, which why would you have to disclose or put out the development cost of every single project? It's just not meaningful. The key thing is to the buyer, is this affordable? And that's what HDB does. And I think for the second question, I'm sorry because I wasn't, if Mr. Singh could just pinpoint the gravamen of what he's asking so that I can be sure I address it.
Sorry, Minister, are you referring to the second SQ or the second limb of the first SQ?
The second SQ.
Okay, the second SQ pertains to disclosing the affordability index for mature estates. That's the PQ. But the Minister didn't answer the second limb of the first question, the first SQ. So the second limb, Minister replied for PLH. I take Minister's answer. The second, even though I may disagree with it, of course, the second question was with regard to the delinking of BTO prices as a reason to reveal the subsidy in full. Has the Minister, is that fair? Okay.
I do have the question, and I thank Mr. Singh for it. Can I ask Mr. Singh to file a separate question on this? The reason is this. I have an answer formulated, but I also want to be sure it's accurate. And because, as you know, it affects property prices and the way people approach it. So I think it'd be safer if it's filed and I give you an accurate answer.
So, Minister, just to be clear, the question you are asking me to file another question for is the reasons why HDB does not publish the affordability index for mature BTO estates. Okay, I'll do so. For the first question, I restate my position that because we have now delinked prices, BTO prices, I think the value of the subsidy becomes more important, particularly with resale prices going up. On the earlier question, which I believe was directed at Mr. Leong Man, why is PQs 3 and 4, I just have, just for clarification and my understanding about how land is booked in the reserves. And I'm looking at this from the perspective of reclaimed land. So Singapore's total land area has grown by 2.45 square kilometers per year for 60 years, from 851 square kilometers in 1960 to 728 kilometers in 2020. The state can reclaim land and draw on the reserves for land reclamation activities and expenses. I think Minister also shared that, alluded to that in her reply. My two questions are as follows. I would like to ask the Minister a supplementary question. Does the value of new land that has been reclaimed go into current reserves? And in connection with this, is it based on the actual cost of reclamation or the value of new land based on the Chief Valuer's land betterment charge tables? That's the first SQ. The second one is for land that has been reclaimed years prior. Is the revaluation for marking to market done once a year based on the annual land betterment charge rates or once every 6 months based on the 6 monthly land betterment charge rates? Or is the value of the land in past reserves held at the cost of land reclamation until it is sold to the government for specific use?
Again, sir, I would ask Mr. Singh to file a supplementary question formally, because the answer is likely to be technical. It has to do with how we treat the land in our books, and I really want to make sure that both the Accountant General and the Auditor General are satisfied that what I say is not inaccurate.